In the annals of world history, there are figures whose brilliance shined so brightly. They seemed to defy the very limits of human capability. Today, we journey back to 13th century Maivet, a kingdom standing defiant against the most formidable empire the world had ever seen, to tell the story of a man who became a legend. Endau Maivan Trần Quoc Tuân. Born into the Trần dynasty, Trần Quoc Tuân's early life was marked by privilege, but also shadowed by deep-seated family conflict. His own father, Prince An Sin, once held a claim to the throne and, on his deathbed, urged his son to seize power for himself. It was a moment that could have plunged the kingdom into civil war, a moment where personal ambition could have overshadowed a nation's fate. But Trần Quoc Tuân made a choice that would define his legacy. Faced with the impending threat of the Mongol Empire under Kublai Khan, he chose unity over division, loyalty over vengeance. He put the nation first. This single, profound decision set the stage for one of history's greatest underdog victories. The Mongol hordes, having conquered vast swathes of Asia and Europe, turned their sights on the fertile lands of Maivet. Their first invasion in 1258 was a shock, but it was just a prelude. The second, and far larger, invasion came in 1285. The Mongol army, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, seemed an unstoppable force. The Trần court was terrified, with many officials suggesting surrender. It was in this moment of supreme crisis that Trần Quoc Tuân's spirit burned brightest. He presented his Hutchinsi, or proclamation to the officers, a document so powerful it has echoed through Vietnamese history for centuries. He wrote not as a distant commander, but as a brother-in-arms, sharing his frustration and righteous anger. He spoke of sleepless nights and a heart filled with anguish at the sight of enemy envoys strutting arrogantly through their streets. His words were a fire set to the soul of his army. I often forget to eat. I lose sleep. My heart aches as if it were being cut, and tears stream down my face, all because I am furious that I have not yet been able to flay the enemy, to peel their skin, to swallow their liver, and to drink their blood. He asked his men, would they be content to see their country shamed, their families imperiled, or would they stand and fight? His call was answered with a resounding roar. The soldiers, moved by his passion, tattooed the words at that, "Death to the Mongols," on their arms, a permanent pledge of their defiance. Against overwhelming odds, Trần Quoc Tuân orchestrated a masterful campaign. He employed guerrilla tactics, stretching the enemy's supply lines and bleeding them dry in the jungles and rice paddies. His strategy was simple yet brilliant. When the enemy is strong, we are weak. When the enemy is weak, we are strong. He forced the mighty Mongol army into a war of attrition they could not win. Exhausted, sick, and demoralized, the invaders were driven out. But the Mongols were not a foe to accept defeat lightly. In 1288, they returned for a third time, this time with a massive naval fleet, intending to sail up the Brichming River to resupply their ground forces. This was where Trần Quoc Tuân would cement his place as one of the greatest military strategists of all time. He knew the river's tides intimately. In a stroke of genius echoing a tactic used centuries before, he ordered his men to plant massive, iron-tipped wooden stakes into the riverbed, hidden just beneath the surface at low tide. He then sent a small flotilla to lure the Mongol fleet into his trap. As the tide rose, the stakes were submerged, invisible. The Mongol warships, confident in their numbers, pursued the Vietnamese boats deep into the river. Then, at the precise moment the tide began to turn, the Vietnamese counterattacked. As the water level dropped, the massive Mongol ships became trapped, impaled upon the hidden stakes. Immobilized and thrown into chaos, The fleet was a sitting duck. Vietnamese fireboats swarmed the enemy, turning the river into a blazing inferno. The mighty Mongol navy was utterly annihilated. The Battle of Bạch Đằng River was not just a victory. It was a masterclass in strategy, a testament to using wisdom and local knowledge to defeat brute force. The defeat was so catastrophic that the Mongol Empire would never again attempt to invade Maivat. Trần Quoc Tuân lived out his days as a revered national elder, a living symbol of the nation's resilience. He penned military treatises that would be studied for generations, sharing the wisdom that had saved his people. When he passed away, the people did not just mourn him as a general. They began to venerate him as a saint. To this day, temples across Vietnam are dedicated to him, where people pray for guidance and protection. The legacy of Hung Dao Mai Van is more than just a story of battles won. It is the story of a man who placed his nation above his own grievances. It is a testament to the power of unity in the face of an existential threat. It is the enduring symbol of Vietnamese courage, intelligence, and the unbreakable will to remain free. His spirit lives on, a reminder that even against the most overwhelming odds, a united people, led with wisdom and heart, can achieve the impossible. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into Vietnam's heroic past. If you found this story as inspiring as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration of history's greatest figures. We'll see you in the next video. Have you ever heard of a general who, facing an enemy that had conquered half the world, declared he would rather die fighting than surrender? This is the story of a Vietnamese legend whose name echoes through centuries. He was born Trần Quoc Tuân, the prince of the royal Trần dynasty in the 13th century. From a young age, he was surrounded by power, brilliance, and a dangerous family secret. His own father, Prince An Sinh, once had a claim to the throne and, on his deathbed, made Quoc Tuân promise to one day seize it for himself. Imagine the weight of that promise, a choice between filial piety and loyalty to the nation, a conflict that could tear a kingdom apart from within. But as the storm clouds of war gathered on the northern border, Quoc Tuân made a choice that would define his legacy. The Mongol Empire, the most formidable military force the world had ever seen, was preparing its invasion of Maivat. At a pivotal family gathering, Quoc Tuân presented his father's sealed words to the reigning emperor, his cousin. He openly rejected the path of personal ambition, declaring his unwavering allegiance to the throne and the nation. He chose unity over division, placing the survival of his people above any personal grievance or claim to power. This single act of selfless patriotism forged an unbreakable bond between him and the emperor, uniting the royal family at a time when they needed it most. As the Mongol hordes, hundreds of thousands strong, poured across the border, it was Hung Dao Mai Van, the title bestowed upon him who stood as the supreme commander of Maivat's armies. The situation was desperate. The enemy was seemingly invincible, having crushed empires from China to Europe. Fear began to creep into the hearts of some officials, who whispered of surrender. It was in this darkest hour that Hung Dao Mai Van penned one of the most powerful documents in Vietnamese history, the Hach Si, or proclamation to the officers. This was not just a military order, it was a roaring fire of patriotism. He spoke directly to his men, reminding them of the shame of subjugation and the glory of defending their homeland. He asked them, would they stand by and watch their homeland be trampled, their families enslaved? And then, he uttered words that would become immortal, a raw, visceral cry of a warrior's soul. I am often enraged to the point of forgetting to eat, and in the middle of the night, I pound my pillow. My entrails ache as if they were being sliced. I shed tears of blood. My only fury is that I cannot yet fay the enemy, peel their skin, swallow their liver, drink their blood. His words were a thunderclap, shaking his soldiers from their despair and igniting in them an unyielding will to fight. Twice the Mongols invaded, and twice they were repelled by the fierce resistance led by Ndao Ivan. But in 1288 they returned for a third time, more determined than ever, with a massive fleet sailing down the Bridgming River, aiming to capture the capital. The fate of the nation hung in the balance. Here, Ndao Ivan orchestrated a stroke of military genius that would be studied for centuries. He remembered the tactics of a hero who had fought on this very river over 300 years before. Under his command, his soldiers planted massive, iron-tipped wooden stakes deep into the riverbed, hidden just beneath the surface of the water during high tide. He then sent a small, nimble fleet to lure the massive Mongol warships into his trap. As the overconfident Mongol navy pursued them, the tide began to recede. Suddenly, the giant war junks found themselves impaled on the hidden stakes, trapped and helpless. From the banks, Maivid's forces rained down a storm of fire arrows, turning the river into a watery grave for the invaders. The Battle of Bridgming River was a resounding victory, a masterpiece of strategy that shattered the Mongol-esque naval power and their will to conquer Maivid ever again. Ndao Ivan lived out his days as a revered national hero, an elder statesman whose wisdom guided the kingdom in times of peace. When he passed away, the people did not just mourn him. They began to worship him as a saint, a guardian spirit of the Vietnamese people. Today, his legacy is more than just a story in a history book. He is the embodiment of Vietnamese courage in the face of overwhelming odds, the symbol of strategic brilliance, and a timeless reminder that when a people are united by a common love for their country, they are truly invincible. His story teaches us that true greatness lies not in the power you can seize for yourself, but in the sacrifices you're willing to make for others.